The dining room was awash in the warm flicker of candlelight, the air heavy with the mingled scents of roasted goose, cranberry sauce, and a bitter undercurrent of treachery. The long mahogany table, polished to a mirror sheen but scarred from decades of family gatherings, groaned under the weight of fine china and silverware, relics of a happier era. My son, Nathan, stood at the head, his wine-glass glinting as he raised it, his voice sharp enough to cut through the murmurs of the gathered guests. "Dad," he said, his tone both commanding and cold, "we've made a decision. You're no longer welcome in this family. It's time for you to leave this house." The words landed like a blow, but I'd braced for them. The room froze, forks paused mid-air, glasses stilled, eyes wide with shock or feigned surprise. Nathan's wife, Olivia, sat to his right, her lips curved in a subtle, triumphant smile, her emerald earrings catching the light. I met her gaze, my own face calm, almost amused, as I slid a plain manila folder across the table, its edges worn from hours of careful handling. "A parting gift, son," I said, my voice steady, laced with an edge only he might catch. Nathan hesitated, his confidence flickering, before snatching the folder. He opened it, his eyes scanning the first page, and his face contorted in a scream that shattered the silence. Papers fluttered to the table, scattering among the untouched plates. The guests gaped, unaware that my revenge had only just begun. They thought they'd broken me, cast me out like a discarded relic. They were wrong. The trouble had been brewing for months, a slow simmer that thickened into venom by December. It started with small slights, Nathan's dismissive tone when I suggested patching the roof, Olivia's pointed sighs as she scrolled through furniture catalogues on her phone, her manicured nails tapping a rhythm of disdain. The house, my house, was a sprawling Victorian on the outskirts of Portland. Its gabled roof and wraparound porch a testament to years of sweat and sacrifice. I'd built it with my late wife, Eleanor, every beam and shingle a promise of a life together. We'd raised Nathan here, his laughter once echoing through the halls, his small hands smudging the walls with crayon. Now, those same halls carried the chill of resentment. That Christmas Eve, the dining room smelled of roasted potatoes, sage, and the acrid tang of unspoken grudges. The table was set for 20 relatives, neighbors, a few old friends, each place marked with Eleanor's china, its delicate rose pattern, a quiet reminder of her absence. I sat at the opposite end from Nathan, my hands folded, a glass of untouched Merlot before me. The guests chattered, their voices a low hum, but the tension between us was a live wire. Nathan, in a tailored blazer that screamed new money, stood abruptly, his chair scraping the hardwood. Olivia, in a sleek black dress, leaned back, her smile thin as a blade. "Dad," Nathan began, his voice carrying the authority he'd honed in boardrooms, "we need to talk about the future. This house, it's falling apart. The pipes groan, the windows leak, and you're sitting on a fortune in savings while we're stuck here, barely keeping it together." His words were rehearsed, each syllable a jab. I raised an eyebrow, keeping my tone even. "Stuck? I paid off this house before you were in diapers, Nathan. You live here rent-free. What's this really about?" Olivia leaned forward, her perfume sharp and expensive. "It's about progress, William," she said, my name dripping with condescension. "We want to modernize new floors, a proper kitchen, maybe an extension. You wouldn't understand." I understood perfectly. Olivia's phone, propped against her wine glass, displayed a glossy photo of a marble-topped island that cost more than my old pickup. Nathan tossed a folded paper onto the table, a contractor's estimate, bloated with upgrades like heated floors and custom cabinetry. I didn't need to read it to know they'd already spent the money in their heads. "You've got savings, Dad," Nathan pressed, his voice rising, drawing eyes. "What's the point of hoarding it? You're not getting younger." The jab stung, but I traced a familiar scratch on the table, Nathan's initials, carved at 8 during a rainy afternoon when he'd been my shadow, eager for my approval. "I've given you enough," I said quietly. "This house, a free roof over your head, that's more than most get." Olivia's laugh was a shard of glass. "Free? This place is a mausoleum, William. We're doing you a favor by staying." Nathan slammed his spoon down, the clatter silencing the room. "You're so damn selfish," he spat, You act like some saint, but you're just holding us back." The air grew heavy, the kind of silence that presses against your ribs. I gripped my fork, its cold metal grounding me as their words sliced deeper. "Selfish?" I repeated, letting the word hang. Nathan leaned closer, his breath hot with wine. "Damn right. You're not needed here anymore, Dad. We can handle this place without you." Olivia's lips twitched, her satisfaction barely concealed. The guests shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting, but no one spoke. I set the fork down, deliberate, and stood, my chair scraping louder than intended. I looked at Nathan, then Olivia, their faces a mirror of greed and certainty. They thought they'd won. "I see," I said, my voice steady despite the fire in my chest. "You've made yourselves clear." I turned, my boots heavy on the hardwood, and walked toward the hallway. Nathan's voice followed, mocking. "What, you're just gonna sulk?" I didn't answer. The dining room door loomed, its chipped paint a relic of better days. As I reached for the knob, a single thought burned through the haze of betrayal. I'd given him everything, my time, my dreams, my home. No more. The door clicked shut, muffling their voices. They thought they could break me. They were wrong. My bedroom was a sanctuary of ghosts, every corner steeped in memories of a life I'd built and lost. The four-poster bed creaked as I sat, its mattress sagging from years of restless nights. A single brass lamp cast a warm glow, catching dust motes that danced in the air. On the nightstand, a framed photo of Eleanor and Nathan Him at 6, gap-toothed and grinning, her curls catching the sunlight stared back. My fingers brushed the glass, trembling slightly. How had it come to this? The house was silent now, save for the faint groan of settling wood. I opened the nightstand drawer, pulling out a leather-bound photo album, its cover worn smooth by time. Flipping through, I paused at a picture of Nathan at 14, clutching a baseball glove, his eyes bright with dreams I'd helped fund. I'd sold my beloved Chevy to pay for his summer camps, telling Eleanor it was just a car. She'd squeezed my hand, her smile knowing. We'd believed it was worth it. Another page, another memory, Nathan's college graduation. I'd worked double shifts at the engineering firm, my back aching from long hours drafting blueprints to cover his tuition. He'd hugged me that day, his cap askew, promising to make me proud. I'd believed him. Now the memory twisted like a knife. He'd never said thank you, not once. After Eleanor's cancer stole her 3 years ago, Nathan drifted further, leaving me to rattle around this house alone until Olivia arrived, her sharp ambition sinking claws into him. I turned the page to a yellowed receipt tuition payment, $18,000, dated 2003. I'd drained my savings, thinking it was an investment in his future, our future. Instead, he brought Olivia, her calculating eyes sizing up the house like a prize to be claimed. She changed him, or perhaps revealed who he'd always been. The album snapped shut. I set it aside, my gaze falling on Eleanor's photo. "Ellie," I whispered, my voice rough, "I gave him everything." But giving wasn't enough. I stood, crossing to the window. Snow fell in slow, heavy flakes, blanketing the street in white. The neighborhood slept, its Christmas lights blinking through the haze. My reflection stared back, grey hair, lined face, but a jaw set with resolve. I'd spent decades being the father who provided, who forgave, who waited. For what? To be told I wasn't needed. A memory flickered, Nathan at 9, slamming his door after I'd grounded him for sneaking out. He'd always had a temper, but he'd come back, sheepish, with an apology. That boy was gone. The man he'd become didn't deserve my patience, nor did Olivia, with her polished smiles and dreams of a life she hadn't earned. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, its screen glowing in the dim room. My thumb hovered over George's number. He'd know where to start, a retired lawyer who'd seen the world's ugliness and still came out swinging. The snow kept falling, soft and relentless. I wasn't a victim, not anymore. I'd been their foundation too long. It was time to build something new. The Iron Kettle was a dive bar on the edge of town, its air thick with the scent of whiskey and worn leather. Dim lights cast long shadows across the wooden paneling, scarred from years of spilled drinks and bar fights. I sat in a corner booth, the vinyl seat creaking as I leaned forward, my hands wrapped around a glass of bourbon. Across from me, George sipped his stout, his grey sweater as frayed as his patience. We'd been friends since our days at the engineering firm, arguing over structural designs when life made sense. Now he was a man who knew how to dismantle lies as deftly as I once built bridges. I told him everything, Nathan's shouting, Olivia's smirks, the way they'd tried to gut me with words. George listened, his eyes narrowing, the lines on his face deepening with every detail. When I finished, he set his glass down, the clink loud in the quiet bar. "They're vultures, William," he said, his voice gravelly. "Think they can peck you apart because you're old. You gonna let them?" I swirled the bourbon, watching the amber liquid catch the light. "No, I'm done letting them." George grinned, a rare glint of trouble in his eyes. "Good. Hit 'em where it hurts, money. Pride. Find their weak spot." I nodded, my mind already turning. Nathan was impulsive, always chasing the next shiny thing, a new car, a smartwatch that cost more than my monthly bills. Olivia was worse, her ego tied to appearances, her Instagram a shrine to a life she couldn't afford. They thought they could bully me out of my home. I'd show them what a lifetime of planning could do. Legally, I added, meeting George's gaze, no mistakes. He chuckled, leaning back. Spoken like the guy who double-checked every beam I ever drew. "You've got this, William. They don't know who they're messing with." I pulled a small notebook from my coat pocket, flipping it open. My pen scratched across the page, the word accounts standing out in sharp ink. Nathan's finances were a mess. I'd seen the late notices he tried to hide, the way Olivia flinched when the credit card reader beeped too long. That was my starting point. "You're scarier than I thought," George said, raising his glass. I clinked mine against his, the bourbon untouched. "To justice." The bar hummed around us, a low buzz of conversation and clinking bottles. A jukebox in the corner played a mournful country tune, one Eleanor used to hum while baking. I pushed the thought away. Nostalgia wouldn't help me now. George leaned forward, his voice dropping. "You sure about this? Once you start, there's no going back." I met his eyes, steady. They made their choice. Now I make mine. He nodded, a spark of respect in his gaze. "Then don't flinch. They'll squirm when you tighten the screws." I tucked the notebook away, my fingers brushing the rough fabric of my coat. The plan was forming, pieces clicking into place, like the blueprints I used to draft. I'd been an engineer once, building things that lasted. This time, I'd build their downfall, brick by careful brick. I stood, tossing a few bills on the table. The bourbon sat untouched, its surface still. "Thanks, George. I'll call you." He waved me off. "Don't call. Just do it." The door groaned as I pushed it open, the cold biting at my face. Snow crunched under my boots, the streetlights casting a pale glow over the empty sidewalk. My breath clouded in the air, but my mind was clear. Nathan thought he could erase me. Olivia thought she could outsmart me. They'd built their lives on my foundation, and I knew exactly where the cracks were. I walked on, the snow falling heavier, each flake a reminder of the storm I was about to unleash. The kitchen was a fortress of shadows, lit only by the faint beam of my phone's flashlight. The mahogany table, usually a place for coffee and crosswords, was now a battlefield strewn with papers, bills, receipts, a crumpled bank notice Nathan had left out, careless as always. I moved quietly, my flannel shirt catching on the chair's edge as I leaned over the mess. Each document was a window into their world, and I was about to pry it open. I lifted a credit card statement, the numbers glaring under the light. 14,000 in debt, spread across designer shoes, spa treatments, and 5-star dinners. Olivia's name was on half the charges, including a 3,000 handbag that could have fixed the roof twice over. I shook my head, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. She'd mocked my outdated curtains while burning through money they didn't have. Nathan wasn't better late payments on a leased BMW, a craft beer subscription he barely used. Their greed was a house of cards, and I was ready to pull the first one. A bank notice caught my eye, the word overdue stamped in red. They'd missed 3 mortgage payments on a condo they'd bought as an investment 2 years ago. Nathan had bragged about it at Thanksgiving, saying it would make them millionaires. Olivia had nodded, her eyes gleaming as she scrolled through photos of luxury penthouses. Now the bank was threatening foreclosure. I scribbled the account number in my notebook, the pen scratched loud in the silent house. A memory flickered. Olivia at dinner last week, her voice dripping with disdain as she called my oak paneling drab. She'd waved her fork like a scepter, declaring the house needed modern elegance. Nathan had laughed, agreeing, while I stared at the family photos on the wall, wondering when my son had stopped seeing this house as home. That paneling had been Eleanor's choice, installed after hours of debate at the lumberyard. They wanted to rip it out, erase her, erase me. A creak from the hallway froze me. My heart thudded as I flicked off the flashlight, plunging the kitchen into darkness. The house was old, always groaning, but I couldn't risk being caught. I pressed myself against the counter, listening. Nothing, just the hum of the fridge and the distant tick of the grandfather clock in the parlor. I exhaled, my breath steadying. They were upstairs, probably asleep, oblivious to the trap they'd walked into. I turned the light back on, flipping through more papers, a receipt for a wine club, another for a yacht club membership Olivia had insisted on. Every line was a thread in the web they'd spun, and I was mapping it out. My engineering days had taught me to find weak points cracks in a structure that could bring it down. Their finances were crumbling, and I'd make sure they felt every tremor. The notebook in my hand grew heavier with each note, dates, amounts, account numbers. I tucked the bank notice into my pocket, careful not to crinkle it. This wasn't just about money, it was about control, about showing them I wasn't the relic they thought. I'd built this house, this life, and they'd tried to claim it without a fight. Big mistake. Another creak, closer now, footsteps slow and heavy on the stairs. Nathan. I snapped the notebook shut, shoving it into my pocket, and restored the papers to their messy pile. The flashlight went off, and I moved toward the kitchen door, my boots silent on the tile. My hand grazed the doorframe, the wood cool under my fingers. "Dad?" Nathan's voice, groggy but sharp, cut through the dark. I didn't answer, my pulse steady, my mind clear. They'd given me the weapon I needed, wrapped in their own carelessness. I eased the door open a crack, the hinges silent from years of my oiling. Nathan's shadow loomed at the hall's end. I slipped through, breath held, and melted into the shadows of the house I knew better than they ever would. The lawyer's office was a stark contrast to my home glass walls, sleek grey carpet, the air sharp with coffee and toner. I sat across from Henry, my old coat draped over the chair, a folder of notes open on the polished table. The Portland skyline loomed outside, its steel towers glinting under a pale winter sun. Henry, in a crisp suit, scanned my scribbled figures, his pen clicking rhythmically. We'd known each other from my engineering days, sorting contracts for the firm. He was sharp, discreet, and didn't waste words. "You're sure about this, William?" he asked, his voice low, eyes flicking up from the page. "It's a bold move." I nodded, my hands steady. "They crossed a line, Henry. I'm taking back what's mine." He leaned back, tapping the pen against his chin. "All right, let's start with the will. You want Nathan out completely?" "Completely," I said, the word heavy, final. A pang of guilt hit. Nathan was still my son, still the boy who'd clung to my hand at the zoo. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who'd spat in my face. I pushed the thought away, focusing on the papers Henry slid toward me. The first was a revised will, naming a local veterans charity as my beneficiary. The house, my savings, everything. Nathan and Olivia wouldn't see a dime. I read it carefully, my old contract habits kicking in. Every clause was airtight, just as I'd wanted. I signed, the pen's scratch a quiet victory. The second document was a bank form, freezing the joint account Nathan still used, a relic from when I'd co-signed his first car loan. His laziness would cost him now. Henry watched, his expression unreadable. "You're cutting deep, William. They'll feel this." "They should have thought of that before," I said, my voice calm but edged with steel. I pulled out my phone, dialing the bank. A quick conversation, a few codes, and the account was locked. Nathan wouldn't know until he tried to use it, and I could already imagine his panic. We moved to the house next. Henry suggested a trust, putting the property out of Nathan's reach. They can't force a sale if you're the sole trustee, he explained, scribbling notes. And if they try to push you out, this gives you legal ground to stand on. I nodded, signing where he pointed. The house was my last bastion, the one thing I'd built that still stood strong. I'd poured my life into it. Every nail, every shingle, and I'd be damned if they turned it into their personal ATM. The pen felt like a hammer, sealing their fate with each stroke. Henry stacked the papers, his tone softening. You okay, William? This isn't easy, I know. I looked at him, my jaw tight. It's necessary. They made their choice. He didn't push. We shook hands and I tucked the folder under my arm, its weight grounding me as I stepped toward the door. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen, Nathan's name, a missed call. My pulse quickened, but I didn't answer. He was already feeling the ground shift, even if he didn't know why. The office door closed softly behind me, the city's hum swallowing the sound. I stood on the sidewalk, the wind biting through my coat, snowflakes dusting my shoulders, melting into the wool. The folder in my hand was a shield, a weapon, a map to justice. Nathan's call meant he was rattled, and that was just the start. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, ignoring the second buzz. Let him squirm, I had work to do. The living room glowed with the flicker of a cooking show, its cheerful host jarring against the storm brewing within. Nathan paced, his phone clutched like a lifeline, the screen's light casting shadows across his face. Olivia lounged on a new velvet sofa, legs crossed, her calm a stark contrast to his fury. I stood just outside, hidden in the kitchen's darkness, the door cracked open. My phone was in my hand, recording every word, every shout. They didn't know I was listening, didn't know the ground was crumbling beneath them. You see this? Nathan thrust his phone toward Olivia, his voice cracking. The account's frozen. I tried to pay the car loan, and it bounced. Olivia raised an eyebrow, her tone cool. Calm down, Nathan. It's probably a glitch. Call the bank. I did. He flung a magazine onto the floor, its pages splaying across the rug. They said it's locked by the primary holder, that's Dad, Olivia. He did this. I pressed closer to the door, my knuckles white around the phone. The bank had worked fast, just as I'd hoped. Olivia shifted, her nails tapping the sofa. Your father? Why would he bother? Because he's spiteful, Nathan snapped, pacing faster. He's been sulking since we asked for the renovation money. You heard him. He thinks he owns us. Olivia's lips curved, a slow, calculating smile. Then maybe it's time he leaves. This house is too big for him anyway. We could sell it, move somewhere better, somewhere modern. My chest tightened, but I kept still, the phone steady. Sell my house? The one I'd built with Eleanor, where we'd danced in the parlor, where her laughter still echoed. They weren't just greedy, they were ruthless. Nathan stopped pacing, his shoulders slumping. You think we can just kick him out? Olivia leaned forward, her voice low, conspiratorial. He's old, Nathan, vulnerable. We'll say it's for his own good. Find him a nice little apartment, somewhere cheap. The house stays with us. It's only fair. Fair, the word burned, but I didn't move. My thumb hovered over the phone, the recording ticking on. They were plotting right in front of me, oblivious to the noose tightening around them. I'd known they were selfish, but this was a new low. My home, my life, reduced to a stepping stone for their ambitions. Nathan hesitated, running a hand through his hair. He won't go quietly. You know how stubborn he is. Then we make him, Olivia said, her voice sharp now. We'll talk to a lawyer, figure out our options. He can't stay here forever, dragging us down. The TV flickered, a laugh track clashing with the tension. I eased back, my boots silent on the tile. Olivia stood, crossing to the window to check the lock. She was thorough, I'd give her that, but not thorough enough. My phone vibrated faintly as the recording saved, their voices trapped in its memory. I slipped into the kitchen, my heart pounding but my mind clear. They thought they could outmaneuver me, erase me from my own life, but they'd just handed me everything I needed. Their plan was reckless, sloppy, built on arrogance. I'd use it, turn it against them, let their own words dig the grave they thought was mine. The kitchen door clicked shut, the sound swallowed by the house's silence. I stood in the dark, the phone warm in my hand. They were plotting a war they couldn't win, and I was ready to strike back. The new lock on my front door gleamed under the porch light, its brass surface mocking me. My key, worn from years of use, didn't fit. I stood on the stoop, my breath clouding in the frigid air, snowflakes catching in the folds of my old coat. The house, my house, felt like a stranger's now. Nathan and Olivia had moved fast, faster than I'd expected. I turned the key again, the metal scraping uselessly, and a cold knot tightened in my chest. They weren't just fighting back, they were trying to erase me. I stepped back, scanning the windows. The parlor was dark, curtains drawn, but I knew they were inside, probably gloating. Earlier that day, I'd overheard snippets of their plan from a voicemail left by my sister-in-law, Ruth. Nathan and Olivia had hired a lawyer, claiming I was unstable, unfit to manage my own affairs. They'd spread the story to relatives, painting me as a senile old man who'd lost his grip. Now this locket wasn't just a barrier. It was a declaration of war. I circled the house, my boots crunching through the snow. The side door was locked too, its new deadbolt as unyielding as the front. My fingers brushed the doorframe, remembering the summer I'd painted it with Eleanor, her laughter mixing with the smell of fresh paint. That memory stung, but I shoved it down. Sentiment wouldn't help me now. I needed a way in, or at least a way to turn this against them. Inside, I imagined Nathan pacing, his voice sharp as he barked at their lawyer. I'd seen him like this before, red-faced, gesturing wildly, always needing to be the loudest in the room. Olivia would be calmer, her words precise, twisting the narrative to make their betrayal sound noble. I could almost hear her. It's for his own good. He can't live alone anymore. The thought made my jaw clench. They didn't know me at all. I pulled out my phone, the screen's glow harsh against the night. George's number was at the top of my recent calls. I dialed, keeping my voice low as I leaned against the garage. "They changed the locks," I said when he picked up, "and they're telling everyone I'm crazy." George's laugh was rough, unamused. "Bold move for a couple of amateurs. You got a plan?" "Working on it," I said, my eyes on the house. "They're digging their own grave. I just need to push." "Don't let 'em rattle you," he warned. "They're scared. That's why they're pulling this stunt." Scared or not, they'd crossed a line. I hung up, slipping the phone into my pocket. The snow fell heavier now, blanketing the yard in silence. I walked to the back door, testing the knob out of habit. Locked, of course. As I turned away, my phone buzzed, a text from Ruth. "William, what's going on?" "Nathan says you're not well. Call me." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. They'd gotten to Ruth too, spinning their lies to anyone who'd listen. The sting of betrayal deepened, but it wasn't despair, it was fuel. They thought they could isolate me, turn my own family against me. They'd underestimated how far I'd go to protect what was mine. I pocketed the phone and headed down the driveway, the snow muffling my steps. The street was quiet, Christmas lights blinking on neighboring houses, their warmth a cruel contrast to the cold radiating from my own. I stopped at the curb, glancing back at the locked door. They thought they'd won this round. Thought they'd boxed me out. But I'd built that house, every beam, every nail, and I knew its secrets better than they ever would. Let them gloat. I'd find my way back in. The cafe smelled of burnt coffee and cinnamon rolls, its wooden tables cluttered with holiday shoppers' bags. I sat near the window, my hands wrapped around a chipped mug, the steam rising in lazy curls. Across from me, Clara fidgeted with her spoon, her bright red scarf a splash of colour against the grey day. She'd been Eleanor's friend for decades, one of the few who still checked on me after the funeral. Now her eyes were wide with worry, her voice barely above a whisper as she leaned closer. "William, I heard something you need to know," she said, glancing around like someone might overhear. "Nathan and Olivia are planning a big Christmas dinner. They've invited the whole family. Ruth, your cousins, everyone. They're going to make an announcement." I sipped my coffee, keeping my face neutral. "What kind of announcement?" Clara hesitated, her spoon clinking against her cup. "They're saying you're unfit, that you've lost control of the house, your finances. They want to declare you incompetent, maybe even push for guardianship." They're using the dinner to get everyone on their side. The words hit like a punch, but I didn't flinch. I set the mug down, its base scraping the table, and leaned back. So that was their game, a public humiliation dressed up as concern to strip me of everything. I could picture it. Nathan raising a glass, his voice dripping with fake sincerity. Olivia nodding along, her smile sharp as a blade. The family, primed by their rumors, might be swayed, especially after the lies they'd spread. "How'd you hear this?" I asked, my tone calm despite the fire in my chest. "Ruth mentioned it," Clara said, her voice dropping lower. "She's worried, but Nathan's got her half convinced you're not yourself. Olivia's been calling everyone, saying you're a danger to yourself. It's awful, William." I nodded, pulling out my phone and opening the Notes app. My thumbs moved quickly, jotting down the details. Christmas dinner, family announcement, guardianship. Each word was a piece of their plan, and I was already turning it over in my mind, looking for cracks. They thought they could ambush me, use the holiday's warmth to mask their betrayal. But they'd just given me an opening, a stage to flip their script. Clara watched me, her brow furrowed. "You're not surprised, are you?" "I'm not," I said, slipping the phone back into my pocket. "They've been building to this. I just didn't expect them to play so dirty." She reached across the table, her hand hovering near mine. "What are you going to do? You can't let them get away with this." I met her gaze, my jaw tight. "I won't. They're counting on me to crumble. They'll get a surprise instead." I stood, tossing a few bills on the table, and grabbed my coat. The cafe door jingled as I stepped outside, the cold biting at my face. Snow dusted the sidewalk, clinging to my boots as I walked. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Ruth, probably more questions I wouldn't answer. I ignored it, my mind racing. The Christmas dinner was their trap, but it could be mine too. They wanted a spectacle, a moment to cement their victory. I'd give them one, just not the kind they expected. The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the snow. I checked my notes again, the words glowing on the screen. They'd opened a door to their own downfall, and I was ready to step through. The lawyer's office was a fortress of glass and steel, its air thick with the hum of efficiency. I sat across from Henry, my folder open on the polished table, papers spread like a battle map, eviction notices for Nathan and Olivia, a court order to freeze their shared accounts, and a list of their debts, meticulously cross-referenced. My engineer's precision had served me well. Every detail was accounted for, every loophole sealed. Henry adjusted his glasses, scanning the documents I'd prepared, his pen clicking rhythmically. "This is ironclad, William," he said, his voice clipped but approving. "The eviction notice is legal. Backed by the trust you set up. They'll have 30 days to vacate once it's served, and the account freeze is effective immediately. You've got them cornered." I nodded, signing the final page, the pen's weight like a gavel, each stroke a step closer to justice. "And the evidence?" I asked, tapping the folder. Inside were recordings, bank statements, even screenshots of Olivia's texts to relatives, all proving their intent to defraud me. I'd spent nights compiling it, my dining room table a war room of receipts and notes. "More than enough," Henry said, sliding the folder into his briefcase. "If they try to fight, this will bury them in court. You've done your homework." I leaned back, the chair creaking under me. Homework. That's what it felt like. Methodical, relentless, the way I'd once tackled blueprints. But this wasn't about buildings. It was about tearing down the lies Nathan and Olivia had built around my life. The thought of my son, once small enough to fit in my arms, now scheming to rob me, brought a familiar ache. I pushed it down. Regret wouldn't finish this. Next stop was the bank, a sterile box in the mall's heart, its grey walls lined with posters about savings plans. The young banker, his tie slightly crooked, typed furiously as I confirmed the freeze on Nathan's accounts. "All set, Mr. Carter," he said, his voice nervous, like he sensed the weight of what I was doing. I thanked him, tucking the confirmation slip into my folder. The numbers were locked now, no more designer bags for Olivia, no more reckless loans for Nathan. Back in Henry's office, we finalized the last piece of letter to serve at the Christmas dinner, outlining their eviction and the consequences of their actions. I slipped it into a plain envelope, its edges crisp, and placed it in my briefcase. The folder inside held everything: their debts, their lies, their recorded plot to oust me. It was my ace, ready to be played when the moment came. Henry stood, offering his hand. "You're ready, William. They won't see this coming." I shook his hand, my grip firm. They never did. Outside, the bank's glass doors swung shut behind me, the sound swallowed by the mall's holiday buzz. Shoppers hurried past, arms full of gift bags, while Christmas lights twinkled above. I stopped, my briefcase heavy in my hand, and looked at the decorations. They reminded me of Eleanor, how she'd hang lights on our porch every December, her breath fogging in the cold as she laughed at my tangled cords. The memory softened me for a moment, but only a moment. Nathan had chosen his path, and I'd chosen mine. Snow fell as I stepped into the parking lot, dusting my coat. My breath clouded in the air, but my mind was clear. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve, the dinner their grand stage. They thought they'd humiliate me, rally the family to their side. But I had the folder, the letter, the truth. The lights blinked on, their glow reflecting off the snow. I tightened my grip on the briefcase. Let them set the table. I'd bring the reckoning. The dining room glowed with candlelight, the scent of roasted goose and pine mingling in the air. The mahogany table was draped in a white cloth, set with Eleanor's china, each plate a silent nod to better days. Relatives and friends filled the chairs. Ruth, my cousins, a few neighbors. Their faces a mix of anticipation and unease. Nathan stood at the head, a wine glass in hand, his smile as polished as the new watch on his wrist. Olivia sat beside him, her posture perfect, her eyes glinting with quiet triumph. I sat opposite, my hands folded, the plain folder tucked beneath my chair. They thought this was their moment. They were wrong. Nathan cleared his throat, the room falling silent except for the faint clink of forks. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice loud, practiced. "This Christmas is special. It's about family, about moving forward. But there's something we need to address." His gaze flicked to me, a flash of disdain crossing his features. He raised his glass higher, his tone hardening. "Dad, we've talked about this. You're not well. This house, this life, it's too much for you. We've voted as a family. You're no longer part of it. It's time for you to leave." A gasp rippled through the room. Ruth's hand flew to her mouth. My cousin Ben leaned forward, frowning. Olivia's smile widened, thin and sharp, as she nodded in agreement. The guests shifted, whispers breaking the silence, their eyes darting between Nathan and me. They'd heard the rumors, Nathan's lies about my instability, and now they waited for my collapse. I stood, slow and deliberate, my chair scraping the hardwood. Every eye was on me, the air thick with expectation. "Is that so, Nathan?" I said, my voice steady, almost soft. "You've decided I'm done?" He smirked, emboldened. "It's for your own good, Dad. You'll thank us later." I reached under the chair, pulling out the folder. Its plain cover drew curious glances, but Nathan's confidence didn't waver. Olivia leaned closer to him, whispering something, her fingers brushing his arm. I stepped forward, holding the folder out to him. "A parting gift, then," I said, my tone light but edged with steel. "Open it." Nathan hesitated, his smirk faltering. He took the folder, his fingers brushing the paper as if it might burn. The room was silent now, the candles flickering, casting shadows across his face. He flipped it open, his eyes scanning the first page, an eviction notice, bold and unyielding, addressed to him and Olivia. His breath caught, his hand trembling as he turned to the next document. A court order freezing their accounts, followed by a detailed list of their debts, their lies, their recorded plot to defraud me. "What is this?" he shouted, his voice cracking. The folder slipped, papers scattering across the table, landing near the goose platter. "You can't do this." "I already have," I said, my gaze locked on his. "You thought you could take my home, my life, and call it yours. Read the rest. It's all there. Your debts, your plans, your words." Olivia snatched a paper, her face paling as she read. "This is a lie," she snapped, but her voice shook, her composure crumbling. The guests leaned closer, reading over her shoulder, their whispers turning to murmurs of shock. Ruth stood, grabbing a page, her eyes wide as she saw the truth screenshots of Olivia's texts, the recording transcript, the bank notices. "Nathan, is this true?" Ruth asked, her voice sharp. "You tried to sell his house?" He stammered, his glass clattering to the table, wine spilling across the cloth. It's not what it looks like." I stepped back, letting the chaos unfold. The folder was my weapon, and it had struck true. Olivia's eyes darted to the guests, seeking allies, but found only disbelief. Nathan's face was red, his hands shaking as he tried to gather the papers. I stood still, my heart steady, the weight of years lifting. They'd set the stage, but I'd rewritten the ending. The front door loomed in the distance, its frame outlined by the hallway's dim light. Someone pointed to it, their voice lost in the growing clamor. I didn't move, my eyes on Nathan. He thought he'd broken me. Now he was the one breaking. The dining room was a storm of voices, the once orderly table now a mess of spilled wine and scattered papers. Nathan slumped in his chair, his hands clutching his head, the eviction notice crumpled in his fist. Olivia stood, her face flushed, her manicured nails digging into a napkin as she tried to salvage her crumbling facade. The guests were on their feet, some shouting, others whispering, their eyes darting between the documents and the couple who'd betrayed me. I stood at the edge of the chaos, my hands in my pockets, watching their world unravel. "Nathan, explain this," Ruth demanded, waving a bank statement, her voice cutting through the noise. "You told us William was losing his mind, but this says you planned to sell his house." Nathan's head snapped up, his eyes wild. "It's not true. He's twisting everything. We were trying to help him." Ben barked, snatching a paper from the table. "This is a recording of you plotting to kick him out. You called him a burden." Olivia stepped forward, her smile forced, her voice trembling. "Everyone, please calm down. There's been a misunderstanding. We only wanted what's best for William." "Best?" Clara stood, her scarf slipping as she pointed at Olivia. "You lied to us. You spread rumors, said he was crazy, all so you could steal his home." The room erupted, guests talking over each other, some grabbing papers to read for themselves. A child at the far end of the table ducked behind her mother, startled by the shouting. Olivia's eyes welled up, her mascara smudging, but she kept her chin high, clinging to the last scraps of her dignity. Nathan, though, was unraveling faster. He lunged for the folder, trying to gather the papers, but Ruth pulled it away, her face a mask of disgust. "Enough, Nathan," she snapped. "You've shamed this family." He turned to me, his voice breaking. "Dad, please, tell them it's a mistake. We didn't mean it like that." I met his gaze, my expression unchanged. "You meant every word," I said, my voice low but firm. "You made your choice. Live with it." Olivia grabbed his arm, her voice a desperate hiss. "William, we're sorry. We'll fix this, just don't do this. We can work it out." I shook my head, stepping back. "You had years to work it out. You chose greed instead." The guests were moving now, some heading for the door, their coats already in hand. Ben threw a paper back on the table, muttering something about disgrace. Ruth followed, pausing to look at me, her eyes soft with apology. "I should have known better, William," she said quietly. "I'm sorry." I nodded, saying nothing. The apologies didn't matter now. The truth was out, and it was sharper than any blade. Nathan's shoulders shook, his voice rising to a plea. "Dad, you can't throw us out. This is our home too." "It's mine," I said, my words final, "always was." I turned, walking toward the parlor, the noise fading behind me. Olivia's voice cracked, calling after me, but I didn't stop. The dining room door swung shut, muffling their pleas. I stood in the dark, the glow of Christmas lights filtering through the window, casting soft patterns on the floor. The family photos on the wall watched me. Eleanor's smile a faint echo of what we'd lost. I straightened one, my fingers lingering on the frame. Outside, car doors slammed, engines starting as guests left. The house grew quieter, the storm subsiding. Nathan and Olivia were still in there, begging, bargaining, but it was over. They'd built their trap, and I'd turned it on them. The front door creaked open, then slammed shut, the sound sharp in the silence. I didn't look back. They'd made their bed. Now they'd lie in it. My new apartment was small, its bare walls still unfamiliar, but the wide window offered a view of Portland's skyline, its lights winking through the falling snow. I sat at a simple desk, a single lamp casting a warm glow over a blank sheet of paper. The pen in my hand felt heavy, not with ink, but with the weight of what I needed to say. Boxes lined the room, some unpacked, others holding pieces of a life I'd left behind. A photo of Eleanor rested on a shelf, her smile steadying me as I began to write. The house was gone, sold for a good price to a young couple who'd fill it with new memories. I'd walked away with enough to start over here, in this quiet space where the past couldn't cling so tightly. The sale had been quick, the paperwork final, each signature a step toward freedom. Nathan and Olivia had vanished after that Christmas dinner, their belongings cleared out before the eviction notice's deadline. I hadn't heard from them since, and I didn't expect to. Some bridges burned clean. I pressed the pen to the paper, the words coming slowly. Nathan, I wrote, my handwriting steady despite the ache in my chest. I've spent years wondering where I went wrong, what I could have done to keep you close. But you chose your path, and I had to choose mine. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I need to move on. This is goodbye. The words were simple, but they carried everything. The love I'd once had, the betrayal that broke it, the peace I was claiming now. I folded the letter, slipping it into a plain envelope, my fingers brushing the paper as I set it on the desk. Forgiveness wasn't for them, it was for me, a way to shed the last of their weight. I'd carried them long enough. Outside, the snow fell in slow, heavy flakes, blanketing the city in silence. I stood, crossing to the window, my reflection faint against the glass. The skyline stretched before me, its sharp edges softened by the storm. I'd built a life once, in a house filled with laughter and dreams. That life was gone, but I wasn't. I was still here, still standing, with years left to shape something new. A box by the door held a few keepsakes. Eleanor's favorite scarf, a sketch Nathan had made at 7, a blueprint from my engineering days. I'd unpack them later, when the time felt right. For now, I let the quiet settle, the apartment's stillness a contrast to the chaos of those final weeks. The Christmas dinner played in my mind, Nathan's shouts, Olivia's tears, the guests' shock. But it was distant now, like a story I'd heard rather than lived. I picked up the envelope, tucking it into my coat pocket. The post office was a short walk, and I'd mail it tonight. Let it carry my words into the void. Nathan might read it, might not. It didn't matter, I'd said what I needed to say. The desk lamp flickered, its light catching the snow outside, each flake a tiny spark in the dark. I grabbed my coat, the envelope crinkling as I pulled it on. The apartment door clicked shut behind me, the sound soft but final. The hallway was empty, the building quiet, but the city waited beyond, alive with possibility. I stepped into the elevator, my boots leaving faint wet prints on the floor. The snow would keep falling, covering the old paths, making way for new ones. I was ready to walk them,